2005 was a big summer for English cricket. It was your first taste of playing against the Australians, wasn't it? 214 off 238 balls for Essex against the Aussies. What was that first taste of playing against Australia like?
I suppose 2005 was a big year for English cricket, and obviously the first time I'd been kind of seeing how cricket could really captivate like the nation, obviously without slagging off NASA too much. Every time we played against Australia, we never really got the result we wanted. I remember 1997, I would have been 12 or 11, and winning that first Test match like they did, and NASA getting the double hundred, Thorpe getting the 100, and winning the first game. Yeah, that was the first. You're old enough to really understand the cricket, and this is our first. We could win the Ashes. Obviously, didn't quite work out of that, and then a couple other series. But then 2005, and I was in the professional game. I was doing okay for Essex, and I'm just obviously watching these amazing games and watching like the effect it had on people, and being around it, understanding it as well was incredible. And then we had that 2-day warm-up game, and I think at the beginning of the series, I think Essex was like, Australia had said to Essex, we'll play club cricketers, just let you be, like, you might have sold out the ground, but they'll be thinking they'll be ahead of the series. They wouldn't want their big guns to be playing just before the Oval. As it turned out, obviously what happened in that series was that their bowls were a bit short of rhythm, and there was, as it always happens in a tour when you're not going as well as you want, selections up for grabs, there's uncertainty. So they played a pretty full strength side.
You made your mark. I can remember making headlines actually, the fact that this young batter at Essex had just taken an under pressure Australia side for a double 100.
Yeah, and Ravi got 100 as well. So it was kind of two young Essex guys doing well. It was a flat wicket. I think Matthew Hayden got 160 before lunch the next day, and said it's like surfing in a swimming pool. So how flat the wicket was, but it was just a great crowd, great excitement, and just to be part of that and do pretty well. Yeah, was probably what it did for my career was it jumped me ahead of the next few batters in kind of in the selection thing, and that I know what it's like now when you're an international player playing Test matches and you have a warm-up game in between. Yeah, the intensity does drop off, and there's certainly an element of that, but there was also an element of them trying to bowl themselves into the team for the biggest game at the Oval.
And if you did jump the queue, 18 months later, you were playing Ashes cricket for the first time in 06-07, down under. How was that as an Ashes baptism?
It was certainly a baptism, and again, you look back at these things, and from that moment, that Australia side, their one thing was redemption and winning the Ashes back off England, where obviously that 2005 side had reached their pinnacle. That side never played again, and I was part of like the next generation, I suppose. That side in 2005, the England side in 2005 never played again. I was on the next tour to Pakistan that winter in 2005, then made my debut in 2006, but the side was breaking up, injuries or whatever. They'd reached their mountain really. But where Australia, that obviously they had that meeting or whatever it was, saying we've got to get them back in 6-7. And I kind of felt the full force of a cricketing nation wanting revenge, and as an experience as a 21-year-old opening the batting, for those 5 Test matches. Obviously, Trez went home. I was going to bat 3. Trez went home, so I went in there. But it was, up to there, my career, had been like a steady incline. I scored some runs in Test cricket. Yeah, that was the first time where I'd experienced the lows of it in terms of, I think I did okay. I mean, I got starts, and then I got 100 in Perth. But apart from that, it was fleeting success, really, if you're being honest. But it was like, to me, it was like the first time I played against the best side in the world, and I came up short, but that's the standard I had to get to. I watched Ricky Ponting bat, that Brisbane 100 he got. I was just like, I didn't realise you could play that well, and that kind of set the standard. And I had to go away after that tour and look at my game and try and be better. But also it teaches you the mental resilience when you are 5-0 down, when you lose 5-0 down in Australia. How tough cricket can be. Did
that 100 in Perth do anything for you in the thought that I've just made 100 in Australia with our backs against the wall against Shane Warne and Glenn McGrath? What did that do for
Absolutely.
a young batter?
well, obviously, if you take the whole series as a whole, I failed, but for a 21-year-old to be able to score those runs against that attack gave me the confidence that I do actually belong at international level. And I know throughout my career you have good times and you have bad times, but one of the main challenges that young cricketers or anyone trying to make their way in international cricket, and you never get it, and I don't care what people say, once you get close to feel like you belong in international cricket and you have the respect to the opposition, I think it goes quite a long way to being able to relax and play. Guys at county cricket get it sooner than you do at international cricket, and then you've got to do the whole step again. So you might be a capped county player, scored your runs, taken your wickets, and you could be 25, 26, and then suddenly you go out to international cricket, and you've got to do that all again. And you've done it once, and it's hard to do again. But when you do get it, then you can kind of focus just on the game, watching the ball, play every ball on its merits, and all those cliches, not thinking, am I good enough here? Am I honestly good enough? And if you can get there, then you might be able to let your talent fly.
Can you look back at that series with any sort of fondness or any sort of sense of privilege that you were there particularly for, I know, Warner McGrath walking off together in Sydney, those sorts of things? Yeah,
I suppose now to be part of that series, and when you can take the emotion out of it and you look back, actually, it's a famous series to be part of, and you were part of cricketing history. Yes, on the wrong side of it, and I think at the time it didn't feel like that, because will I ever win an Ashes? Will I ever be part of an Ashes winning side? Will I ever all those kind of questions you then leave Australia in January 2007. If I knew what I know now, what was going to happen to the England side and me being part of it, then been fine. But obviously at the time was very raw. And I remember at the end of that series, my girlfriend and I think her dad and that were out. My mum and dad I think were out. And then let's go for dinner. And I couldn't. I just said no. I don't want to go out. I just want to sit in my room, and because I didn't want to face people because I felt embarrassed about it. But then I think now I suppose a bit older, you kind of we came against a very good side. We weren't good enough, and you hold your chin up, but it does take a bit of an effect on you.
And did you just sit in your room?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I let them go out, and I just had the evening to myself to contemplate.
And if you were thinking, "Am I ever going to win an Ashes series?" Well, you did in the next opportunity. 2009 was a bit of a funny one in that it was a fantastic series that went to a proper decider. It was 1-1 going into the Oval. It's almost a bit forgotten, isn't it? Because it came so soon after 2005. But a lot happened in that.
Yeah, again, I think that's what, when you start looking back on why the Ashes is so special, it creates memories, and memories that people remember. I know you just said 2009, it's not a famous series, but, for me, it was a famous series because I remember halfway through that series, it was 1-1 or whenever we were down or up, I remember talking to people, I just give anything to be there at the Oval to win the series. And yes, I didn't play a massive part in that series in terms of the runs I scored or whatever, but I remember leaving the Oval on day, I want to say day 3, but it might have been day 4 when they were putting the stage up. And we obviously trotted 100 and we were dominating the game. It was, you never know with Australia, with people, when you have Hussey, Ponting, all that, Clark, you feel as if they could chase anything, especially when you're so close to it. And I remember walking past the Straussy and they were putting it up thinking, God, this time tomorrow we could be celebrating. And that was an incredible moment, but there's still a lot of hard work to do. So that's what I think Ashes cricket does. It gives you the opportunity to create memories and things you don't forget.
You took the winning catch.
I did.
At short legs, Graham Swan bowling, Mike Hussey,
who played an unbelievable 100 to save, to save his career in one sense. People were doubting his place. Which you kind of forget, don't you, how it happens to great players. Even in 2010, people are questioning his place, but that was a fantastic 100. And although randomly, like a couple of people, one person, or Derek Randall, he took the catch to win the Ashes, and he was my. He was at Bedford School as a cricket pro, and I remember him doing a Q&A about the Ashes, and he said, one regret was I took the winning catch, and in my enthusiasm I just threw the ball up in the air and ran off, and the ball was never seen again, for him anyway. So he said, the one thing I would do is I'd have kept that ball, and it made me a millionaire. That was kind of his thing in front of all these people. I was like, well, if I ever get... this is a 16-year-old kid or 17-year-old kid, I think. It was like, well, I'm never going to play for England, but if I do get the opportunity, I'll never let that. And then One of my friends, a guy called Ian Elliott, who I used to open the batting with for Malden, or bat 3, and he was like, when you're a youngster, this guy was playing Malden first team, scored all the runs. It's like kind of like my hero of like trying to emulate him. He texted me that morning. He said, if you catch the ball, put it in your pocket, because that's what he used to do at Slip. He used to catch the ball, put it in his pocket. That was his kind of thing. And so there I was, like there at short leg, and I wasn't thinking that I was going to take the catch, but when I did take the catch, my kind of the subconscious took over, and there I was, everyone else was running around, and I managed to have the presence of mind to put it in my pocket.
Where is it now? What happened to it?
Well, I'll tell you what happened to it. Did Swanee get 5 for in that innings? I think he got 4. He wrestled me for it, because he was like, I want that ball. And because I threw him I was like, yeah, here it is, and just there's another ball lying around, and I threw it to him, and he obviously realised it wasn't the ball, and then he tried to wrestle me for it.
In the Oval dressing room?
Yeah, that evening, obviously, maybe a few beers down, but obviously I'm a lot stronger than him, so it was absolutely fine. He had no chance. Did my WWF moves on him, but then about a year later, like Lord's Museum said, have you still got that ball? Can you donate it to us? And we thought we donated it to them, and I do think he's got donated by Graham Swan and Alistair Cook on it. And I'm like, well, there's no, you know what Swanee's like, just trying to get anywhere, any publicity he can, but it's certainly my ball, not his.
As an experience, having that taste of winning the Ashes at home in a remarkable finish to the series when it was 1-1 going to the Oval. And there's all sorts going on. Said Jonathan Trott came in and made his debut and made 100. People were asking for Mark Ramprakash to play, weren't they, if you remember? Yeah. Just for a one-off test. Come back. It's a cup final. And there was all the furore around Andrew Flintoff, who was retiring from Test cricket, and there was the run out of Ricky Ponting on the final afternoon. Yeah. What was that experience like to be part of the wave of emotion and celebration?
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic, and to be part of it was very special. But there was a burning desire to know. Jimmy and I both said to ourselves, "God, wouldn't it be nice to have played a bigger part and been more successful in this thing?" And we sat in the Oval change room, just had 10 minutes with us, and we both said the same. I think he bowled okay, contributed moments, but consistently throughout the series hadn't been this, hadn't some bit like Trotty there. I know he only played one game, but made a big impact. And both of us felt like we hadn't made an impact in that series. We'd like to have done at little moments. At Lords, obviously, got some runs, but not like a standout. So that was the next thing. Yes, I'm now an Ashes winner, but could I wanted to make a difference in an Ashes series,
which you did. 18 months later, but I guess the famous part of that story is that you were under a lot of pressure before that series. You made the 100 against Pakistan just before, I think it was the last Test match of the summer. But how did you ever feel like you might not go on that tour?
The tour wasn't on my radar because I was batting so badly. Ironically, I think I'd scored 300s that winter. I changed my technique. So I was in 2009. After sitting there, I was like, twice now I played against Australia, the best side in the world, and I'd averaged 30. Was my technique good enough against the real pinnacle of Test cricket? So I then did a lot of work after 2009, straight away after that series, went with Gucci and we sat down and we kind of thrashed out, and I changed my technique.
In what way?
I mean, more rigid, more straight-lined, and trying to be... Because obviously my original technique, and the technique which I played most of my career with at the end of my career, and after this 8 months of trying to improve it, I had lots of moving parts, and if those moving parts weren't quite in sync, I couldn't be great, and that's what I thought. And there's always that nagging thought in your mind, isn't it? Is if I change it, will I be a better player? So I went with him, and we did lots of I did my pre-trigger movement, a bit like Jack Callis, be very still at the crease, backlift. I did have a double one, but try and keep it more tucked in and more precise. And actually, I think I scored 200s in the one day against Essex at the end of that season. Then went to Bangladesh and South Africa and scored 100 in Durban and 200s in Bangladesh. So
you're captain, weren't you, as well?
Yeah, I was. And so I was like, yeah, this is it. But then as soon as the ball started moving back around back in England, that rigid technique just wouldn't get me out of trouble. So it wouldn't jam the ball the thing. Wouldn't just, if the ball nipped, I wouldn't just somehow get an inside edge on it and survive. I'd got out. And also I was hitting a lot of balls straight at fielders, mid on and mid off, trying to be better, rather than hitting them through mid wicket. which was like technically a worse shot, but a run scoring shot, I was hitting them straight back at the bowler. And I got very stuck. And I had a terrible summer against Bangladesh and Pakistan I think I was averaging single figures. So that Ashes tour wasn't on my radar. It was like, oh my God, I'm playing my last game for England. That's kind of how that summer was. I couldn't get out of the rut. And that Oval Test match after the first innings, I was 4 not out or something overnight, and that was a nick through the slips. And I wasn't in any great frame of mind to be socialising or anything. I just went down to the bar and just was not drinking, but I was eating dinner and had a couple of drinks on my own. Cause, like sometimes you just do. You don't want to talk to anyone. And the sports psychologist came up to me. Obviously, a bit of a warning sign, innit? Like a bloke who's obviously struggling with his form, sitting on his own, and he's like, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Well, not really. I'm about to go and finish my last innings for England." That's my exact words. And he said, "Can I help?" I said, "Well, what are you going to do? Bat for me?" Like he was with a friend and just walked off. Obviously, he's like, "Oh, I should be there to help." And I just made a pact to myself that night it might be my last innings, but don't get out defending. Which obviously you've watched enough of my batting. I'm built about defence and grind the opposition down and build a long innings, but I just didn't want to do that. And I also said I'm going to go and use my technique, or my old technique. And I hit my first ball for 4 the next morning, through mid-wicket from off stump, and I was away. And I got 80 odd by lunch. And that 100 certainly then got me on that tour. That's the summer, so I wasn't in the best spot. I wasn't flying. I then had the clarity in my mind, saying, well, this is the technique, which is my best technique. It might not be the best technique in the world. It might not suit everyone, but I can't be any better than I can be. So my ceiling is with this technique. And that clarity, it was a very nice moment to have. And also then when you haven't scored runs, when you find a bit of rhythm and find a bit of clarity in your mind, you're so hungry to make most of it.
Just before we get on to what happened in Down Under in 10-11, did you manage to miss the training camp in Germany, where a lot of the team describe it as the worst 3 or 4 days of their life?
I did. My brother got married, and so did Trotty, and I think he was the second leading run scorer of that trip. But I was genuinely gutted I missed that trip, because although the lads say it's the worst 3 or 4 days of their lives, I actually did turn up. I turned up for the last day, so I missed the first 2.5 and turned up the last day. And actually, what was the best thing about it, apart from, I was like, what the hell has gone here? Because it was just a group of broken men. To
set the scene, Andy Flower and Andrew Strauss led the team to somewhere in Bavaria.
Well, that's where they went, and they certainly didn't lead it. They were given they gave Reg Dickinson the do whatever you want. But
he's the head of security.
The head of security guard. I think he did some racing for Australia. Just do what you want with us for 3 days, make it tough.
And they were picked up at the airport by some very big men.
Yeah.
Led into the forest.
Yeah.
All sorts went on. They were marched up hills, and
4 a.m.
They were in a boxing ring.
And waking up 4 a.m, camping. Just taking people totally out of their comfort zone. But when I turned up on day 3, I was like, what the hell? Obviously, I felt like the total outsider. They knew what they're doing, all that kind of stuff. But the 2 most broken men were Flower and Strauss. I was like, you deserved it because you obviously organised it. And so Ravi Bapari just looked like he was absolutely fine, like normal Ravi. So I missed out on that. But what it did do is it gave a few people the chance to get a few things off their chests, and people see people from a slightly different thing, but a different environment. But they were talking about it for ages, and I was like, "Do you remember?" They're like, "Do you remember this and that?" And that's what those camps do. And yes, there's always going to be people who hate those things. It doesn't matter what you do. Like you could do anything, and they'll hate it. But the fact that everyone was still talking about it, and I think it gave a lot of slightly people just below, I suppose, lead management level in terms of the players. They probably came out their shells a bit more and did wonders for them. But yeah, I don't think it was particularly easy.
So 10-11 in Australia, some bare facts. 766 runs. 235 not out in Brisbane, the drawn first test, when England were 517 for 1 in the second innings. 148 in the win in Adelaide in the second test. 189 in the win in Sydney. In the fifth test, I think
an 80 in Melbourne as well.
You alluded to it with your technique. Is that the why? Can you now, what are we, 12 years on, do you know why that series was so productive for you?
I just hit the sweet spot of batting. Perth, I didn't score any runs in the warm-up game. I think I got Adelaide. I didn't bat particularly well, but I got 100. I didn't notice anything like I was in great form or anything like that. And then I got to Brisbane, and I was gutted in the first innings. That, on the big occasion, you win the toss, you bat. Gabatoire's a pretty uncomfortable place to play. And Straussy out third ball. And I fought and got 60 odd. And you go saying want to make a difference. I go back to 2009 where I was in the series, I played and won, but didn't make a huge impact with the bat. And I had a great opportunity on day one to go and get 100, which I always think is a great marker for a player. Can you stand up in the biggest game on the first day? And I missed out, and I was genuinely gutted. And obviously the hat trick, I was the first ball of Peter Siddle's hat trick. So I was gutted there, but we're soon back out in the field because there, and then they got millions, though we bowled pretty well. And I remember going out on day 3, like we had 8 overs maybe to go. And I was, this is tough. You've pretty much been on the field for 3 days, got through that, and then from that moment on, I did find some rhythm. Yeah, and I could just remember make a difference, and this is an opportunity. And after that game, it was the first. I think it might have been my 14th Test 100. So it wasn't as if it was like early on, but I remember that was the first Test 100. I thought I'd made a real impact on the game. Yes, it was a drawn game, but with the psychological effects of Brisbane, all that kind of stuff, I delivered when the team needed me most, when we're behind and under pressure. And I think that just gave me unbelievable self-belief. And I was just, because of what had happened so far that year when I hadn't been scoring many runs, I was just determined to make play. And I remember the next time in Adelaide, I've always been there. Okay, I've got 100 next week. I've got to get 100. Do you know what I mean? Don't. You score 300 runs in the game. Don't be the bloke who only scores 400 in the series and kind of wish away. And so actually to score 148 next week after the whole physical exertion of Brisbane, spending pretty much 5 days in the field, to do that, it was unbelievable. And I remember batting in those nets in Adelaide, and I was like, Gucci's slinging them down, and I could almost feel like I could hit anywhere. I was leaving the good ones, and any time he missed that perfect thing, I was either driving or cutting him before, and I was just like, I'm in some good space now. Let's make the most of it.
Can you remember that feeling of what it was like?
I can't. But I couldn't. No, because obviously then waking the game, you're nervous, all the anxiety which goes with performing under pressure. But I do remember that net with Gucci through, and he just tapped my glove and said, "You're in a good space," and I knew I was in a good space. And then it was just a matter of, can I carry that on? Will it last? And don't upset the cricketing gods. That's all I was ever thinking. Don't do anything different. And I didn't for pretty much 7 weeks.
Favourite moment from that series?
I can't get over the feeling we had when we won at Sydney. When Chris Tremlett got that wicket, I mean, during the game, that Mitchell Johnson song when he walked out to hit that song, he bowls left, and then he gets first border. I remember I was at mid-off. Like, the atmosphere was incredible. It was loud. And Chris Tremlett just said to me, I'm just going to bowl this as fast as I can. I've got no idea where it's going. He bowled an absolute jaff, and he's full, swung in, nipped around. And the noise that Barmy Army made there, obviously then serenaded Mitchell Johnson off as well. Just changed the word bowling to batting. Was that moment really like that was proper. I was there moment. But when we won at Sydney, took that final wicket, all the anxiety of the last 7 weeks, which you feel you don't feel it unless you're playing. Like, you sit here and, as a commentator or whatever in the crowd, there's this barrier of no anxiety. Like we were dominating games of cricket, and yet that maybe just the way I was bred or the way I operated. There's always that. Oh, they could get back in this game. We could be chasing 100, even though they're like 350 behind on day. Like the Sydney, they might get under 450, and we've got to chase 100, and you can't. I just could not help that. So that's what kept me on the edge. And when that final wicket gone, I think. We might have won by an innings and 70 maybe. I still had the thought I'll have to go and bat again. That's how I was. So so when that final wicket all gone, sat on the outfield, drinking away, just talking as a group, and that was the moment. I was like, that's a job well done. And I remember flying home from Australia. I didn't play in the one-day series, didn't have the World Cup to go to, which is probably a blessing in disguise in one sense. I got to really enjoy the fact that I sat on that plane and we won the Ashes, and I scored as many runs as I did. I don't often get ultimate satisfaction, do you? There's nothing more I could have done on that tour, which is about the only tour I've ever had that experience, or a series where you couldn't have done any more. So I did enjoy that 24 hours, just that pure and utter relaxation.
2013, you're captain. How different is that as an experience?
Well, so I suppose at this stage I'd won the Ashes twice as a player. That in itself is, I've been lucky enough to play in the era I did, and we mentioned Nasser and Alex Stewart and some greats of our game who came against a very good Australian side, clearly. Never could call himself an Ashes winner, but twice an Ashes winner. And I don't want this to sound arrogant. Obviously, to be a man of the series in the bigger series is a nice thing to have, and you don't appreciate at the time, but you certainly do now. And then I suppose, like everything, there's the next challenge, isn't it? You'll suddenly find yourself as a skipper going into the series, and can I be an Ashes winning captain? That's, again, can you define even more of your career? And that's kind of what it felt like to me.
You won 3-0.
Yeah, we did, and it was if you go back to it, it was the 10 in a row, and there was calls, this England side will beat them 10-0. That was, I remember someone shouting, I think it might have been Beefy. I'm sure it's just a bit of a throwaway comment. So we were expected to win. We were kind of won in India, and it's that you're talking about a series which definitely goes under the radar. For me, it was all about winning, but there was a realisation at the end of that series, and certainly after what happened down under, that there is more to winning. There is a way of playing cricket.
By that point, now this was the third consecutive series that England had won the Ashes at home, having not done it for 20 years, up to 2005. Was it a case of almost by that point, not necessarily the England team, but maybe England fans were taking it for granted that the Ashes was being won at home? And second, was that a popular team in terms of the way you were playing? And you've just alluded to it in about a way to win.
I don't think it was a popular team, no. And that's certainly probably what we found out after that. I don't think we were unpopular. This was like during the Twitter transition, I would say. This would have been like the social media had been around for 5-6 years, and we were very single-minded as a side. Obviously, led by Andrew Flatt, led by Andrew Strauss, then followed on by like myself, and our ethos would all be trying to shut outside noise down, trying to just concentrate on ourselves, be singly minded in our operation, in our focus, in how we play our cricket.
Quite an attritional style sometimes as well.
Yeah,
wasn't
it was an attritional style. You played to our strengths. Jimmy, Stewart, absolutely relentlessly ruthless for the ball. Don't bowl many bad balls. Led, I suppose, in the style of me as a captain at the top of the order of the batting, just grind away, and very effective. Became number one in the world. This is like, obviously with Strauss, and then kind of the next stage on when I was captain and winning India here. But what it was again, probably the end of the cycle of that team, which then fell apart when, I don't think you should ever have to play 10 test matches in a row against Australia. I think that was a fundamental mess up by...
It's completely beyond your control.
Absolutely, like so we never have a World Cup and an Ashes in the same year. But then we're now back to having a World Cup and Ashes in the same year. But to ask the players to do what they did wasn't easy. Because I remember we won it 3-0, and I remember saying to lads at the end of the dressing room, like, normally there's no message at the end of it. Let's just go and enjoy the thing. And I remember saying, look, we're halfway through. We've got a chance to go and beat these guys in their place. So I want us to enjoy a little bit, but let's get back straight on it. And maybe that was my bad as a captain, because. You can't I think Stokes's comment recently about we're not like sports people aren't like cars. You can't just fill them up with fuel, and I think that was exactly what happened there, and and exactly what it can happen when you ask too much of players.
Your team was taking a bit of flack as well by the end of it as well for something that happened at the Oval in the celebrations where some of the team got accused of urinating on the outfield.
Yeah, look, I'm sure it wasn't the finest moment of it, but again, I can't defend it. I mean, or whatever. We were not a disrespectful side at that time. Everything was so serious in everything. That was. We probably could have just held our hands up and laughed about it, but we tried not to inflame the media.
Was there any sign at that point, at the end of the home summer, any inkling of what was about to come?
No. I didn't play the one-day series.
Because that was the first exposure to Mitchell Johnson 2.0, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And, obviously, I'd had pretty good memories of facing Mitchell Johnson, so he certainly wouldn't been on my radar going down there in 2013. Everyone's if he's bowling well, I was yeah, I'm fine against this guy. I've scored a lot of runs against him in the past. Yes, he might have got me out, but I'm pretty confident that I'll carry on. But then just the feedback from that series was, God, he's bowling quick. I kind of just brushed it off, we'll be fine. Maybe I should have paid more attention. Maybe I should have all these things, like how I operated when I wasn't playing cricket. I was away on the farm, not thinking about cricket all the time. Was really good probably for my longevity? Was it then good? Was I doing enough research and all that kind of stuff and taking real interest in, like maybe that could have been warning signs at the start of Trotty. He played that series. He was offered it off and he chose to take it on. I'm pretty sure that's right. But I remember him playing. Maybe I should, if I was watched every ball from there and been on the phone to Flower and Ashley Giles there and then all the time, we might have been able to, to realise. But this is all hindsight, and everything's brilliant in hindsight.
And you went to Australia, but after another team building trip that didn't go quite so well, was it? It was running around Stafford looking for surveillance and all sorts of things.
Again, I was not involved in it.
How did you manage to skip that one out?
No, I was there, but I wasn't involved in any of the planning and preparation.
Okay.
And this is, so Flowers like I want to do another camp, after the success of the other one, but I don't want it to be quite so hardship. I want it to be more enjoyable, like take totally outside, I think. And I think that was the remit he gave the person who ran it. But Flower didn't want to get involved because he wanted the surprise as well. I think this, again, I don't want to, which seems quite unlike Andy Flower not to know exactly what's going on, but I'm pretty sure this is right. Anyway, we got there and it was an absolute disaster from the moment we got there. Like, they tried to book the hotel in Stafford or something, and there was a bikers convention, so all the hotels were booked up. So we were staying 45 minutes in, yet the bloke had organised in Stafford. So we're driving 45 minutes in to do our surveillance, and then driving back. The food was rubbish. Sounded great on paper, but actually the 3 days was a complete and utter waste of time. The lads hated it. And again, could we have just pulled the pin after day one? I'd imagine if Brendan McCullum had been there and organised and he wouldn't have done surveillance and been on a golf course, but if he had, he would have just said, "Oh my God, this is not what I signed up for," and done it. But that was hindsight, and it probably just summed up what I was about to experience. Like, for something which went so well in 2010, although some of the players will say they hated it, that was just a kind of a great symbol of what was about to happen.
This is the TMS podcast from BBC Radio 5 Live.
More from Alistair Cook in a moment, including why he was left in tears at the Melbourne Cricket Ground after what turned out to be his final 100 in Ashes cricket. That's after this.
Tailenders. Much more than just a cricket podcast.
Loosely cricket-based, meaning we very rarely talk about world cricket.
Yes, but when we need to, we can do.
Boy, can we deliver. As England's greatest ever bowler, you don't need to do this podcast. But why do you? Welcome to Tailenders, a loosely cricket-based...
Thank you for having us, Tailenders, loosely cricket-based.
...with podcast from me, G-Force, him, Felix White, him, Jimmy Anderson, Sachin Tendulkar distantly.
Tailenders.
Listen on BBC Sounds.
You're listening to the TMS podcast from BBC Radio 5 Live.
That series in 2013-14, 10 years on now, do you have an understanding of what happened and what went wrong?
We fell apart under pressure, and there's a lot of warning signs. Selection was wrong. But again, when you're talking about selection, you're in the moment. When I say selection was wrong, I'm putting this with hindsight, where tall bowlers tend to do well in Australia, hit the pitch, be good. But if your bowlers can't, it's on paper, but then there's injuries, lack of rhythm, like Stephen Finn, leading wicket taker up until in 2010, 11. By the end of that tour, couldn't hit the cut strip. I know he's chatted to you, and it was a tough moment for him. Jonathan Trott leaving the tour, Boyd Rankin playing one game, cramping, and we had 4 or 5 debuts on an Ashes tour. Talk about preparation of a tour, that should never happen. But maybe because this thing was 3 months after the last Ashes, it wasn't given due care attention because we were forced to do something which had never been kind of done before, I think.
And you were the Ashes holders, you just won 3-0.
Exactly. So look, ultimately, I chatted to someone the other day about this, and as a leader, I wasn't good enough. Every time I go to bed thinking about it, which I don't really, but if I did, when the hit the fan, I wasn't good enough to lead us through that. And we fell apart, and it was an absolute shambles. And I ultimately, when you stand in 2013 on the stadium and you're picking up the Ashes, you get some credit, and ultimately you're down to the other people who've done it, really, because you no matter how good a captain you are, it's down to the team. But you get that iconic moment. So then, you have to be big and brave enough to say, when you don't win and you lose 5-0, you have to be responsible for that team, not the other lads. You do, because that's just the nature of the beast. And I look back and I wasn't good enough to lead that there. I think learned a hell of a lot from that as a leader, and I'd love to know what would happen again if I was put in that situation again. I'd hope to think I'd handle it better than I did, but who knows? It was I look back now on my Test career, and I'm glad I went through it at some stage, because then you just do appreciate what the lads are about to go through on both sides, win, lose, or whatever. And it does. Yeah, it wasn't particularly pleasant. No.
You're talking about it now, 10 years on, but in the moment, what were you personally going through? Because you said a little bit earlier that at the end of the 06-07 tour, you didn't want to go out for dinner with your family.
No, yeah.
So what were you going through in 13, 14 as captain?
Well, obviously, I was relieved it was over. I won't lie to you. I think it was a 3-day game. I was relieved it was done. The difference there was like, well, I'm the leader of this team. I can't be the one sulking, chin up and face the criticism. And I felt as a leader of that team, that's what I did. As in, like, I didn't hide away. I was honest and just say, right. But what I did know then as a side, if I was given the opportunity, remember, we had the KP Shally Ashanti play that was going on during the one-day series. I think we only won one game on that tour. What do we do with this team? Will I be given the opportunity to rebuild it? Because that's it's a crash bang. Swanee gone, Trotty gone, KP going. It's 3 fairly big players of huge importance to English cricket and huge success no longer there. And would I be given the opportunity to try and rebuild the side? And do I want to do? And I didn't want to be. The last Test match as a captain was a 5-0. I didn't want to be. That's not how I left it. And I wanted to be. I want to be part of the kind of the process to getting us where English cricket should be.
How close were you to not carrying on?
No, not at all. No, if I was given the opportunity, I still had the hunger to do it. I wanted the opportunity to, because I felt I could lead the next generation of the side through. Like, I felt I had a part to play. So, yeah, there was no decision on my. That might have been taken out of my hand, yes, but I'm sure there might have been moments, but nothing I can really think about.
Closer to quitting in the following summer during that India series?
Yeah, the Sri Lanka and India. That was the Sri Lanka series when they were 100 behind 7 down or level 7 down, and we lose that series.
Headingley,
and Jimmy got out. Not the end of that game, no, but day 4 when we were 3 down and I was one of the 3. That was as close as I was to quitting. Like everything, I do remember Alice came up and she'd been up for either day or day before, I can't remember, and Elsie wouldn't have been very old, couple of months. And I was watching some, could it have been Athletics Commonwealth Games? I remember just sitting there holding Elsie, watching TV in my own little world. But thank God Elsie and Alice were there, because it's a stark reminder that however important cricket was, there is other things. And as an England captain, sometimes you're so engrossed in trying to be the best leader you can be and trying to lead a side through and under 5 days of pressure, and that's what makes it. It's not just 5 days, is it? The 5 days people see, but there's obviously a lot, but it's a long game and long drawn out thing. But that was certainly the lowest moment as captain.
What significance then did the 2015 series take on? Because you've just mentioned about rebuilding a team, and I'll go through some of the names actually that won the Ashes at home in 2015. Lyth, Root, Stokes, Butler, Moeen, Wood. Not necessarily guys that hadn't played Ashes cricket before, but certainly hadn't succeeded in Ashes cricket before or won an Ashes series. Was that your team, did you feel, and what satisfaction did it give you to win that series? I think
it definitely was my team. It wasn't like, so I'd say 2013 was still probably had remnants of Strauss's team. From the bottom of Sri Lanka, when we lost to Sri Lanka in 2014, to winning in India. I know we lost the first game at Lords and we drew here at Trent Bridge, but that series, from that moment on, it felt like my team. There's a few things we tried to be a lot more, probably in my a bit more in me and my kind of character. Good on the field, but also good off the field. Like trying to be more accessible to the crowds, try and give ourselves more time with the public and play with a smile on our face and as much as we could do. Stokesy's taken to a totally different level. I'm not trying to, but there's certainly a big shift and not take ourselves as seriously as a thing. But then also trying to develop Ben Stokes, Joss Butler. And I'm not taking any credit, or should take any credit, for their development of these world-class, once-in-generation players, Joe Root. But obviously I was part of their thing, given their debut and also their kind of development in Test cricket. I'm not taking credit for it, but I feel that it was my side. And also going in, if you go back into that series, we were heavy underdogs. Mark Butcher, I'd always remind his quote said,
did he say watch behind the sofa?
Yeah, just watch behind the sofa for the next 7 weeks or something, like just before the series. It was nice being the underdog, actually, even at home. But I just felt if we didn't get hammered in the first couple of games, and like those players could, a lot of people haven't played much Ashes cricket, realise these guys were beatable, then we're in for a shout.
What does it mean sitting here at Trent Bridge? Because this was the ground where you sealed the Ashes. This was Stuart Broad's 8 for 15. Mark Wood taking the winning wicket. For you, as captain, having gone through what you had 18 months earlier, to then know that you'd won the Ashes, what does it mean to be here? What memories does it bring back?
Trevor Bayes just turned up. So it was great. I felt very sorry for Peter Moores at the time. And I didn't agree with the decision, but Straussy was director of cricket, and he was like, no, this is my decision. And as a captain, you don't make those decisions, you're influencing. But and Trevor came up, and Trevor was very Australian, and he is an Aussie. What it did do, certainly like when he's chatting about those players, which he knew very well, he was saying he was very good at just pointing out a few of what they'll be thinking. Like these Australian cricketers won the World Cup. Mark Butcher said what he did. You could look at them as superheroes, and actually Trevor, because that's Trevor just broke it down very quickly. Like, actually, no, he'd be thinking, oh my God, last time I bowled a duke ball, this and that, and I'm sure that was a tactical ploy by him to some of the players who hadn't played. And we played very well in Cardiff, and then got hammered at Lords, and it was 1-1. And I think the Australians will think, well, they've had their one game, we'll come back, and at Edgbaston and here we just dominated from ball one. We bowled unbelievably well, won 2 important tosses. We won here.
When Broady wanted to bat. Got a bat here, but it's like, yeah. But remember, Jimmy was injured as well, so like not everything was plain sailing, but I do remember Edgbaston here, 2 weeks of not sleeping. Because after day one, we had such good day ones in both these games. Going back to I don't want to remember the captain who lost from almost, bowler side out of a 60 Test match. You win 999 times out of 1,000. So if I didn't won that, it would have obviously really hurt me. But we did. I didn't have much sleep. The lads were brilliant, and I come back here, and I suppose that was my job done, wasn't it? That was I led a side which weren't favourites, and probably the only time I ever got emotional in the post match, wasn't it? I was. Athers asked me a question, and I choked up. So I suppose that probably showed how much it meant to me and how proud I was of that team, which I thoroughly enjoyed captaining. Did you know then that you probably wouldn't do another Ashes as captain?
Yes, I think deep down. I think not at that moment, but if you'd have sat down 2 days later, would you want to go to Australia and do it? I wouldn't have said 100%, but say 60-40.
So on that 17-18 tour, which turned out to be your last Ashes series as an England player, did you have any inkling it would be your last as an England player?
I don't know. I know some thoughts have been creeping in the summer. I tell you what, that tour, it hurt me because I thought I'd go down there. I thought I wasn't captain anymore. Australia's a great place to go and bat, and I had this opportunity to go and help Joe Root score a lot of runs at the top of the order. I like batting in Australia. And for 3 games, I just didn't do it. And that hurt me. Going back to what I originally said about not making a difference in the side. And that got me down. Not got me down, got me... I felt like I was letting the side down. Because there was no, pressure of captaincy. I just go out and do my stuff and bat. Didn't deliver, and that irritated. And that really, that got me down.
Well, this is your chance to maybe have a pop at me. So... First 3 tests.
Not another one.
Well, exactly. So, first 3 tests, the Ashes were gone in the earliest possible opportunity. Yeah. And you, having been a part of 2 whitewashes, obviously you'd won down in Australia, but you'd also lost 5-0 twice.
Thanks for reminding me.
But is there a feeling of, firstly, here we go again, but that test in Perth, the third one where the Ashes were lost, that was your 150th. And I remember asking you in the press conference before that game something about your future as an England cricketer.
Yeah.
And you put me away.
Good. You deserved it. What did I say? You got it in your magic book there.
I'm trying to find what you said to me, but you put me away pretty quickly.
Good.
And then, as obviously I've got to know you when you've worked for Test Match Special, after you finished playing for England, you've sort of said to me before that you thought that speaking to the press wasn't necessarily your job, that your job was to either captain when you were captain or score runs. And it was interesting to find that out about you, having been put away on a number of occasions in press conferences. So I'd had this tetchy answer from you before Perth. You got 7 and 14 and later said that you were embarrassed by your performance in Perth.
Yeah, I just wasn't. I wasn't very good, and I'll just go back to say what I said. Like, I felt I'd let Ruti and the side down. Like, my one job, senior batsman, top of the order, was to set the platform and score some runs, and I felt like, you know, I was obviously good enough to do that, but I didn't, and so that did hurt. And just go quickly back to the press thing now, and my job was not to talk to the media, rightly or wrongly. Now, this is where, you know, when things change, isn't it? When you see things differently. When I was playing, I just wanted to put all my focus on my training, my batting, and playing cricket. This other stuff, which I know it's like what it's like now, where the media gives you your chance to show people who you are and what you're like. Like, now looking back, and people see when I was playing and a very different me, because I didn't want to waste any energy. Like, if I come to a commentary box, I'll make sure I give my energy to talking well, hopefully clearly, hopefully with some kind of point, and you're really thinking. And after a day in the commentary box on the media, you're tired. I haven't done anything physically, but you're really on it. But after, say, we did training day before a game, I went to do the press. You know, I'd done my hard work. I was ready. I didn't want to waste my energy going there. And I suppose the realisation I know that now is a lot of people come up to me when they speak to me, either if I'm doing a Q&A or just being around the place. I was like, oh God, you're very different to what I thought you were going to be. And that probably shows I probably went too far. But that was just my method of coping, of trying to play the game longer.
So you made 244 in Melbourne in the fourth test. After what you said that you felt like you hadn't delivered, how important was that?
Not as much as you'd think, because the series was dead, and it was all about, you know, it was after the horses bolted. Like that, I'd always think that innings was after the horses bolted.
But you were really emotional when you went to three. So Australia in the first innings made 327.
Yeah.
You were, when you went into bat, you made 100 before the close on day 2. You were really emotional in the middle, and you went back to the dressing room, and what happened?
Yeah, I just got into change room and put a towel over my head, and probably in relief, and I just started crying, bawling my eyes out. And people who know me, and I get a lot of criticism from my wife about, you're very unemotional, you're very just level, like things. I don't, you know, if I get 100, I don't run around too much. I don't, and if I get 0, hopefully I'm not too down. I try just how I am is how I operate. I can't help it. But for whatever reason, I don't know what triggered me, but for 5 minutes I had a towel on my head and I cried my eyes out. And I don't know what that was, whether it was relief, whether it was going back to that didn't deliver when it mattered.
A lot had happened to you in Australia over the course of
exactly. And that could have been it. And I remember people tapping on the back, and they did not know what to do, because obviously they'd seen me for 150 odd test matches, or however long people in the changing room had been. Of just, probably none of that. And then you get the awkward bit of when do I take my towel off here? When you you've cried all your tears. And what do I do now?
What did you do?
I think I probably just wiped my eyes and said, "Can I have a beer, please?" and just try to ignore what had just happened. But then I tell you what, that I look back at that 100. I don't think I could have played any better. That day and the next day was as well as I could bat. And to walk off there at the end of day 4, 240 not out. It doesn't get. I know the series is dead, but that I did enjoy that. There was no tears at the end of that one. That was just a very special moment to score. To score such a big score on a pitch was doing all sorts was good.
Pitch that doing all sorts.
Well, this is that I knew it, because Simon Mann, who always goes on about, it was a horrible test match. It was flat. No, anyone. But we bowled them out for 300, and actually, if it hadn't rained, we had a good chance of winning that game of cricket. And we were level 7 down, weren't we? I think so. It wasn't. So I always fight back, and I always bite, and I can't help it about it. So well, if it was that flat, how come everyone didn't get double 100?
And our back and forth continued.
Did it?
It did in the press after. So
Good.
244, I think, is the 5th highest score an Englishman's ever made in an Ashes Test. It's the highest ever score by a visiting batter at the MCG.
And I'm hoping, because everyone now thinks that pitch is so flat, they keep playing on green seamers, so no one will get anyone near that.
But you came into the press after that and said, actually, I thought I might have been dropped if I hadn't scored some runs. Yeah. And I asked you about your future again. And you were in the press conference with Joe Root, and you turned and said something to him quite quietly. You whispered.
Yeah.
And I thought you'd called me a name. So,
I bet I probably did.
So our TV guys are there, and for the days after,
You're trying to work
slowing that footage down.
And did I say anything?
I don't know. We couldn't work it out. I think subsequently, I think what happened is, before you'd gone into the press conference, you said, I bet someone asked me about my future. I dopily obliged. I think you turned to Joe and said, Told you so. Told you so. You left Australia. But you've sort of mentioned it already. Did you know that your career was coming to an end, that you'd never play another Ashes Test?
Yeah, I remember getting to New Zealand, and that was another conversation I had with Chris Silverwood. But I remember lying on the outfield at halfway through the first Test match in New Zealand, and I said to Spoons, I don't quite know what I'm doing here now. I think I'm done. Long way away from all the stuff, isn't it? A long way home, the relentless nature of everything. Go to Australia, 5 Test matches. A month later, get on a flight, go even further. All that kind of thing, and not missing a Test match, which I was very proud of. That probably the one record I am proud of is the not missing a Test match and never ever backing out of a challenge, or never, in my eyes, taking an easy option. I remember there, I was like, I think I knew the end was close, and to be fair, Spoons gave me great advice: get home. Have a month off, and then don't make any decisions now. And I did go into that summer in 2018 with intentions of not retiring at the end of the summer, but playing on and trying to make a difference and stuff. But again, you start there, and very quickly it knocks down, and it's just quicker. It's a quicker process, and I knew I was fighting the embers, I suppose, of it.
And famously, that summer, that was it. 100 at the Oval. Alice heavily pregnant, watching you as you made that turn in what turned out to be your last Test innings. We've covered your entire Ashes career. How do you reflect on it, having gone through it step by step?
Yeah.
You've got a smile on your face now.
I think it's a smile because I'm quite proud of what I've been a part of. Some bloody amazing times, some pretty bad times, some pretty average times, and I suppose that just sums it up. I don't think anyone. Well, obviously, I was going to say Jimmy and Stuart probably, but they haven't done the captaincy bit of it, I suppose. So I think anything an Ashes series has thrown at me, I've had every single bit of that, and I feel lucky to have been able to experience that. And I think that's what playing for England does, and certainly plays in Ashes. It gives you an opportunity to go into spaces you don't know what's going to happen. You have a chance to be good, you have a chance to be bad. I look back, I think I was 4-3, wasn't I? Played 7, won 4, lost 3. So just always, whatever happens, I might have lost more Test matches than I'd won against Australia, but sets and legs in darts, isn't it? Like just enough to say I won more than I lost.